So recently I saw this video titled "Video Game Piracy is Good," actually, and it was a super interesting video for a multitude of reasons. The first being that this was going to be a video that was in support of piracy rather than against it. Which at first I thought was going to be something no one was going to get on board with. Honestly, I kind of want to go through this video piece by piece and play devil's advocate to some of these points. Firstly, for the sake of argument.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. No, this isn't an argument.
And secondly, because I just don't really agree with this take at all, and I think it's incredibly dangerous to adopt the viewpoint that piracy isn't bad simply because big corporations aren't hurting for the cash. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Before that, I'm not a lawyer either. I'm somewhat of a dumbass, and anything said or done in this video is only meant to spark debate and discussion, as well as being created for entertainment only. In the intro to the video, Lextorias goes into detail on what piracy is and isn't. He explains that piracy isn't actually theft as much as those ads we saw back in the day on the subject made us think they were. Instead, it's a matter of copyright infringement, since whenever someone pirates a game, it's not like you're actively stealing any physical copies from a storefront, like GameStop or the like. Instead, you're just obtaining another digital copy, of which there are an infinite number. So there's no loss of property. Instead, piracy would more aptly be looked at as a case of copyright infringement, and this was decided in a court case by the US government back in 1985. Still, piracy was looked at as a case of illegal activity, so sure. While we can sit here and say, well, technically piracy isn't theft at all like the ads say they are, you and I both know that piracy still isn't something that should be taken lightly. It's not like you're obtaining the copy of software you're downloading legally when you pirate something. You have to pay to obtain a digital download of the software from its proper source. And if you use third parties to circumvent having to pay for the software, barring legal semantics, it's hard for me personally to not look at that as theft. That's entirely why copyright infringement became a thing, because from my understanding, it's to cover stealing intellectual property that's digital in nature. Anyway, that's why Lextorias makes sure to make that distinction, and while being an interesting one, I don't think it really helps piracy's case in any substantial way. Copyright infringement and those piracy ads you and I have both seen obviously weren't enough to prevent people from sailing the 7 seas, and so companies had to take matters into their own hands. Enter Denuvo. Everybody hates it, nobody loves it. Basically, if you don't know what Denuvo is, it's a software that was created as an anti-piracy measure that uses software encryption techniques, among other things, to, like I said before, prevent piracy. However, Denuvo has been shown to cause performance issues within games, like lower frame rates, stuttering issues, and the like. And herein lies the issue. Cracked versions of the games don't have Denuvo, and so in a lot of cases, the free version of the game often ends up being the better one to play, because there's no extra software with your game packaged within it causing stuttering and issues. So why even bother buying a game that's an inferior product when the cracked version plays better? And what's the point of even having Denuvo if the game is going to get cracked eventually anyway? And to that I say, ooh. That is one tough nut to crack. The thing is, Denuvo, at the very least in some cases, helps the initial launch of a game not get cracked, as reverse engineering what Denuvo does can take a bit of time. And if even that little bit of time bought can help a game receive more sales legally, then I'm all for it. The best case scenario I see happening is Denuvo improving to the point where it will no longer noticeably impact game performance, so companies can feel secure in knowing that their game is at least somewhat protected, and gamers can feel secure in knowing they're getting the most complete experience when buying the official version. Either way, at least for now, while pirating the game could net you better performance since Denuvo won't be there, you don't know what else could be packaged with the game you're pirating because you're not getting the game from an official source. Trust me, I've seen firsthand the sketchiness of some of these piracy websites. I don't know how some of you guys aren't completely uncomfortable with the fact that you're installing this AAA game signed by this Russian developer and not think that there's gonna be some malicious keylogger or backdoor on your $1,000 plus gaming machine you just got for your birthday.
Cut off the head, 2 more will take its place. Hire a bio-coded web pet. Okay, dude, listen, what, dude? No.
Getting a nasty virus on your machine could be a lot more costly than just having purchased the game officially, where you know with 100% certainty what you're getting. So to me, that extra cash spent for that peace of mind that I'm not unknowingly installing something malicious is worth it to me, even if I have to deal with annoying performance issues as a result. So to say that pirating is 100% the better option simply because Denuvo isn't there isn't completely true, but I do totally understand the need for a solution to this situation. It's just a catch-22 though, because companies can't remove Denuvo entirely because they don't want to give piracy groups free reign to post their software everywhere willy-nilly, but paying gamers don't want to have to deal with unnecessary software in a game they already paid for.
Gradecraft?
The worst part is, that's me.
What?
That's me.
Hopefully, as technology continues to improve, a solution that satisfies both parties will be able to come to fruition.
Meaning, assuming the numbers are accurate, if even 10% of the pirates had bought the game, they would have doubled their revenue. However, even with that insane rate of piracy, the game made its production costs back, funded 3 more sequels, and became one of the highest-selling PC games of all time. So it's pretty hard for me to agree that piracy hurt them that bad.
If even 10% of the pirates had bought the game, they would have doubled their revenue. So it's pretty hard for me to agree that piracy hurt them that bad.
Okay, yes, Crytek was successful in spite of their games getting pirated out the wazoo, but to say that piracy didn't hurt them that bad when you also admit that if 10% of pirates actually purchased the game they illegally downloaded, then that would have doubled their revenue? In what world is piracy not hurting them that bad? I don't know, call me crazy, but I think Crytek's concerns over piracy were very much warranted when they lost over half their potential revenue due to piracy, especially when we consider the game was super successful even as a result of piracy. Imagine what they would have took home if people had just played by the rules. It's no wonder the company ultimately decided, screw PC gaming, we don't want people to pirate our hard work anymore, we're console exclusive only. The argument that they're making a lot of money anyway, how much more money do they really need, which is basically what Lextorias is saying here, is something I just feel like is so silly, as if having successful sales completely makes piracy okay to do, because a successful studio doesn't need any more of your money anyway. Just a few short seconds later in the video, we see that Crytek was beginning to go under, because they were completely out of money after just a few failed projects.
Need some change?
No,
Why?
because I'm all out of money!
Is that because of their bad business decisions? Sure, but would that extra money have helped from when they were at the top of their game back when Crysis and Far Cry released? Probably, yeah. Either way, it gets to the point where condemning piracy in some cases and then allowing it in others is this slippery slope. If piracy is fine to do in the case of Crytek, since it didn't hurt them that bad, then where do you draw the line? I've seen many people in the comments of this video, as well as online in general, think that it's okay to pirate from big, greedy companies like Ubisoft and Nintendo. Oh, they have so much money they don't even know what to do with it all. But small indie studios? Yeah, well, you gotta cough up the cash for that because they actually need the money, and to me, that just feels like flawed logic. You can't have it both ways. Nintendo still has employees to pay, and by pirating their games, that money is not going where it should be. The same goes for Ubisoft. I don't care how greedy you think that company is or how much you don't want to support them. If you're playing their games, you 100% absolutely should be paying for the ability to do so. There shouldn't even be any contention over this, period.
It's pretty easy to look at your sales numbers declining and blame people playing the game for free, even if it can't be proven that they'd have bought your game anyways. After all, no studio has shut down specifically because of piracy, and Crytek's numbers only really declined after they implemented DRM and started making console exclusives.
Lextorias addresses this by saying that in the example of Crytek, piracy was used as a scapegoat for their problems. And it was the DRM practices in an attempt to prevent piracy that ultimately drove down sales. But based on the sales figures he talked about earlier, it's kind of hard for me to agree that piracy didn't play a role in their downfall at all, and to agree that Crytek used piracy as a scapegoat. I mean, if he didn't think more than half of their revenue being lost due to piracy wasn't a pretty huge-ass deal, then I don't really know what else to say here. Either way, only Crytek really knows what went down behind the scenes, and both he and I are only speculating as to the real cause. But if Crytek went so far as to completely stop developing for PC and blaming piracy as the reason along with figures to back up their reasoning, I don't really see any reason not to take them at their word here. All in all, I can agree that piracy's effect on sales generally are inconclusive. As he says himself in the video, there's research in favor of both sides of the argument, but in Crytek's case, at the very least, I don't think it's wrong to say that they were hurt by it, regardless of their success in spite of the piracy issues. I also want to address Lextorias' correlation argument. I'm not sure if I just don't get what he's trying to say here. Lextorias starts off this argument by citing a study in 2009 that stated that for a 1% increase in piracy rates, music sales then declined by about 0.6%. Pretty clear-cut case of piracy affecting sales, right? Well, wrong, according to Lextorias. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because beef jerky sales in the US and incest went up around the same time, that doesn't mean they both caused each other to happen, right? Well, the problem for me here is that sales and piracy are kind of related. If you pirate that country music album you've been waiting to hear for a while and don't go out and actually purchase it from your local music store, then yeah, the record label lost out on sales, so it would make sense for sales to then go down in turn. Sure, correlation doesn't equal causation, but it would make a lot more sense for piracy and sales to be affected by one another than his example of beef jerky and incest, as much of a good time as that sounds. Lextorias uses Epic Games as a prime example of a company generating an absolutely insane amount of money through Fortnite while still laying off 830 people. He also talks about how Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games, is worth a whopping $4.1 billion and how this is kinda weird, right? Actually, it's not really that weird. This is just kinda how capitalism works. Some people hate it and some people like it. Which side you land on is up to you, but while Lextorias lists some prime examples of capitalism's dark side, there are numerous benefits as well. Some of your favorite games wouldn't exist without capitalism because capitalism is what drives competition between your favorite companies and encourages them to make good games. Also, I absolutely think a company generating more revenue does give it the ability to reward employees much more than they would be able to than if the company had poor sales on a game due to various problems, including piracy. I mean, more sales means more money, and those extra sales can be used to reward the people who worked hard on releasing the games you're playing. We literally saw the opposite being the case with Crytek earlier, where they were forced to withhold payment from their employees to prevent themselves from going under because of how poorly they were doing financially. You don't think employees would have gotten their paychecks on time if the company were doing better. I disagree. As shitty as it is that Crytek's employees weren't getting paid, it was a direct result of the business not being able to keep its head over water. And a majority of the reason for that, according to Crytek themselves, was piracy. Lextorias using CEO's net worth as a scapegoat to suggest that companies generating more revenue doesn't make employees more money just doesn't really seem like a fair argument.
Can't cook a fucking muscle.
You? A fucking
Yes.
Georgian. Yeah?
Tim Sweeney founded Epic Games. Of course he's going to be worth a ton of money. Like I said before, this problem isn't an issue with piracy, it's a problem with capitalism. And I feel like it's an entirely different discussion than what this video was about originally, which was piracy and its effects on the video gaming industry. Still, all in all, I think it's important to understand something Lextorias seems to completely miss throughout the entirety of this video that defeats the piracy is good argument more soundly than anything I've said thus far. The best way to combat bad business practices, or Denuvo, or microtransactions, or whatever thing you don't like within your favorite media is to vote with your wallet. If you don't like Denuvo in your games, then don't purchase games with Denuvo included in them. Show developers that by excluding Denuvo, you're willing to shell out money in support of them. But to pirate it just because it's the better way to play, or because you want to play it but don't want to pay for it?
Sounds good to me.
I don't think that's right, and I don't think that's a good mindset for the industry at large to adopt. Hell, Crash 4, a game I had been wanting to play for some time, was something I purchased back when it was only available on Battle.net. But to my surprise, when I purchased the game, I couldn't actually boot it up. The game required internet access in order to be played, and for some reason, my internet wasn't working.
Bill, you can turn off the internet.
It's off.
So the game I had just bought and now owned literally couldn't be experienced because of some stupid restriction the devs decided to include for God knows what reason.
I just can't have a good game. I just can't. I just can't.
Crash is a single-player platformer. What reasoning is there to have the game require internet access? Stupid! Either way, I immediately refunded the game because I wasn't about to deal with that BS. Did I go pirate the game to circumvent that ridiculous issue? No. I voted with my wallet, and now the game's on Steam and hopefully doesn't have that issue. Emulation. Now, this is something Lextorias and I can somewhat agree upon. I love emulation, and I love playing retro games in a totally souped-up resolution on my PC. Really, it's pretty much all I do nowadays, and I don't even bother with modern releases much anymore. And the best part is, it's totally legal. You can dump your own copy, boot up the emulator, and have a much better experience with your retro game than if you were to play on the native hardware. With that being said, that doesn't mean I condemn just going ham and playing the entirety of the Switch library just because Yuzu was able to emulate the Switch while it was still a mainstay and one of Nintendo's most successful consoles to date. There is a line to be drawn here, and in the case of emulation, I really don't think piracy is all that black and white. With the passage of time, sometimes games can get lost in the noise, and without emulation, there would be no feasible way to play older releases reliably. The game may not be actively produced anymore, and copies online on sites like eBay or Amazon can reach up to double or triple the amount they officially retailed for just a few short years ago. Emulation in cases like these is something I can totally get behind. But I also feel like a lot of people like to use game preservation as a way to play whatever the hell they want on an emulator just because they can. And so I think being wary of when something is actually game preservation and when something is just straight up piracy is an important distinction to make, and something that Lextorias glosses over a little too quickly within his video. Using Yuzu as an example again, Nintendo essentially won their lawsuit against Yuzu, forcing them to pay $2.4 million and immediately shut down the Yuzu emulator from being distributed in any way, shape, or form. Even Citra got caught in the smoke and got discontinued as well. But emulation is supposed to be legal, right? How was Nintendo able to utterly destroy Yuzu and Citra so easily? Well, I think that Yuzu is a bit of a rare case when it comes to emulation. And Nintendo had a bit more of an edge in their argument because of the fact that Yuzu was widely used to play Tears of the Kingdom a week early, and was undeniably used to experience the game for free by many, many people. That's not really fair to paying customers that patiently waited for the game's release date, and Nintendo certainly used Tears of the Kingdom as a tool to get the Yuzu devs to settle, especially when we consider that the game was downloaded illegally over 1 million times on the PC. I want to be clear here though, I am in favor of emulation, and emulation is completely legal. There should be no reason to take down Yuzu when we think about the fact that as long as you're dumping the system files from your Switch console and Switch games, you're doing nothing wrong. Suyu is a new fork of the Yuzu emulator that I believe makes it a bit harder for people to play pirated games on it. The Suyu version requires you to bring the firmware, title.keys, and prod.keys from your Switch before you can decrypt and play Switch games, whereas Yuzu only required prod keys. So I think the closer we get to helping Nintendo and other companies understand that emulation should be something we cherish, as it allows us to experience their games far past a hardware's lifetime, is a goal we should strive to reach. And even if emulation becomes something they want to prevent, by law, emulator developers should know they're in the right, as long as they're not trying to make Tears of the Kingdom, a flagship Zelda game widely available on their emulator a week before release. Anyway, I think you get the idea. There are cases where emulation is a valid use case and cases where it isn't, so I just wanted to make my view on the subject a bit more clear. Okay, gamers in foreign countries certainly get the short end of the stick. Because of Steam's new pricing systems, they're effectively priced out of new releases, simply because of how currency scales according to the US dollar in these foreign countries. Hence, their games cost significantly more than usual because of how weak their local currency is when compared to the US dollar, and that's definitely a shitty situation all around. The only way to reasonably get these games then in a foreign country is piracy. That's a good thing, right? If consumers in places like Argentina and Turkey are able to experience the games in some way, shape, or form because they were priced out, then that's all that matters. Well, to me, this isn't such a black and white situation like Lextorias makes it seem. The reason Steam even decided to have this price change when dealing with foreign countries to begin with was due to the fact that purchases in countries like Argentina and Turkey would sometimes result in them costing less than they would in places like the US. And so Steam users would sometimes take advantage of this loophole, swapping regions to score the best Steam price for specific games. This pricing issue due to currency exchange rates was also tough on developers too, since devs would have to constantly amend Steam prices to reflect the changing currency values that happen in different countries, since the currencies aren't stable. Having the prices given in US dollars allows for a more consistent pricing experience across the board, and you also don't have the issue of consumers trying to game the system to get their video games cheap. Does it suck that places like Argentina and Turkey are effectively priced out because of this change? Yeah. Does pirating these games create an alternative solution for the time being for those countries? I'd have to conclude also yes, but I definitely wouldn't say this is a win for the gaming industry, and pirates should give themselves a good old pat on the back for doing a good deed. All in all, it's a lose-lose situation. Even if gamers in foreign countries wanted to give money to Steam for their games, it would be a net loss for the developers, since they would be paying significantly less than what your average US consumer would for the same product, simply because of the currency discrepancy. But I would argue that it's at least marginally better than not paying for the game at all and just pirating it.
Large T, not paying for that.
All in all, I have to agree that piracy isn't black and white, but to say that video game piracy is actually good for the industry is something I just think is untrue. There are some very specific use cases where I think piracy is fine, like in the case of emulating old games that are no longer readily available. But to go as far as to say that piracy doesn't hurt companies from generating enough revenue, or to say that piracy doesn't potentially affect employees from getting paid a decent wage, isn't something I agree with. If piracy is such a good thing and everybody who played games was a pirate, then there literally wouldn't be any games to pirate to begin with, because they wouldn't exist.
So, from our point of view, what we saw more and more is that piracy is the result of bad service.
I want to end this video addressing the Gabe Newell clip within Lextorias' video. Better service most definitely does make piracy less prominent, and I think that's an awesome way to look at the debate. But I would argue that providing better service shouldn't be the only solution. The best response is not to pirate, but instead to vote with your wallet. You shouldn't pirate the game just because you don't feel like paying for it, or because you just have to experience this new game some way, somehow, or even if it's the better way to play it. You should just spend that money you would have put toward the game and give it to a company you actually feel deserves the money. It's not okay to experience a game completely for free when people have put their blood, sweat, and tears into a game. And this video is meant to stand by that fact and conclude that video game piracy is not good, actually. And that's gonna mark the end of this one, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, this video took me a long time to make. Yeah, if you guys could hit that like, hit that subscribe button, show me some appreciation, I would really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll catch you guys all in the next video ski.